Hey guys, what's going on? It's Jordan here. Welcome back to the channel. Thank you for stopping by. So if you've clicked on this video, you are interested in the Canon RF 50mm f1.8. So let's go ahead and dive into this bad boy right here. Alright, so first I just want to start off by saying, so brand new, the Canon RF 50mm 1.8 is $199, so that's a pretty good price compared to the equivalent for EF mount glass. You're looking at I think they're like $125.99 now new, which I'm not sure if the price on those went up or down. If I remember correctly, I think they used to be a little bit cheaper, but still not a bad price, especially for a prime lens and a 1.8 aperture. This right here is roughly a little bit smaller, I think, in general compared to the EF 50mm f1.8 lens itself. So that's always a plus too, especially when you have a smaller lens mounted on your camera. You don't have as much weight and you don't have as big of a camera setup as you would with like a DSLR. So definitely a win for the full frame mirrorless community with a small 50mm lens like this. So the nice thing with it being a 50mm on the Canon mirrorless system, from what I can tell, at least with my EOS RP, is the EOS RP allows you to crop in on the image sensor to a 1.6 times crop, so you can go from a 50 to an 80mm no problem, which is nice, especially if you want a little bit more of a telephoto lens. I do find myself sometimes switching between 50 full frame and 85 1.6 times crop, so it's a nice feature on the Canon EOS RP to switch between those two. So if you want a full frame image or if you want a cropped in 1.6 times crop image, you can get the best of both worlds, which is nice. So maybe something to consider if you're planning on picking one of these up. Now on the lens itself, it does have a dual control switch here, so you're able to switch it from focus to control ring. The control ring on the RF glass itself, probably one of the nicest features that any of the camera manufacturers have involved into a piece of glass. Now, sometimes I will say is a little bit of a pain, specifically for when you're switching it into focus mode. Now, and here's the reason why I'll say this. So it's kind of a con in my book, but if you want to go from autofocus to manual focus, you have to go into the menu system itself, go down through it, find your autofocus system, turn the autofocus to manual focus, and then you're able to focus manually. When I first received this lens, I had to do it with this lens specifically because this is currently the only RF glass that I own from Canon, but I had to go in and I had to switch off the autofocus to put it on manual focus. Now, when I first got it, I did play around with it on autofocus for a little bit, and I'll say that it autofocuses very well. So maybe if you just want to pick up and go, throw this on autofocus and just go to town. But realistically, I like to have a little bit more control manually. So that's why I throw mine on manual, but that's just me. I'm not everybody else. So just take that into consideration. Now, when you switch the control button on the lens over for the control ring up here, super nice. So the control ring is nice because you can set it up for either aperture, shutter speed, ISO, or exposure compensation. Now, if you have the lens set to autofocus, basically if you needed to change any settings, it's just a little click right here, change your ISO, your shutter speed, or your aperture, throw it back into there, and then you're good to go. So that to me is a plus, something that I enjoy, especially coming from a DSLR from Canon. It's nice to have a lens that has a separate entity, kind of like, I mean, you get two things in one. So you get a focus ring and then you get a control ring, which is nice. So set it up and then just go to town. I used to have my multifunction button up here set for ISO and a few other things, but I turned this control ring into my ISO setting. So basically all I have to do is while I'm shooting, click it over, set my ISO, click it back, and then go back into focusing. It's a huge game changer, to be honest with you. Now, for the price, a $200 50mm lens at an f1.8 isn't always on somebody's radar, but I will say this much for this lens right out of the box. This lens is ultra sharp. And when I say ultra sharp, I mean that this lens right here, even at an f1.8 is, I mean, it's sharp. I was outside just messing around with it when I first got it, and it's for the sensor and this lens paired together, it's just ultra sharp. And like the settings that I have on my profile on this camera, I believe I took some of the sharpness out, but even that, I mean, it's still razor sharp. So it's, for 200 bucks, a really good buy. So the 50mm itself, as everybody knows, is a pretty much good all-around lens for like portraits, landscape, street photography, product videos. It's basically just the all-around lens. And with an f1.8 on the Canon EOS RP, or even one of the Canon full-frame mirrorless systems, you don't really have to necessarily worry about the aperture a whole lot unless you want super soft, big round bokeh. Then you're probably going to want to go with something like the f1.4 or the f1.2. Now, I know Canon doesn't have an f1.4 50mm lens yet, but I would think probably at some point they will update their systems to have a $200, maybe a $400 or $500 f1.4, and then the super expensive L1.2 lens. So just keep that in mind. When you're purchasing this lens, you might see an upgrade probably in the next couple of years for a Canon RF 1.4 50mm lens. Now, I will say that there are a few downsides to this. I don't like that there isn't a dedicated autofocus button on here. I would have liked to have seen an autofocus switch as well as a control switch. It's just something that I think that a lot of people, if you wanted to do autofocus, you can just switch it on and off. Like a lot of other Canon lenses, I mean, you just want to be able to switch, you know, between autofocus and manual focus in just a quick switch. And it's just something that I think is kind of a letdown, and I don't understand why Canon did that. Not sure. But like I said, I mean, I normally use manual focus anyway, so I just threw this onto manual focus inside of the system itself, and then I just went to town with it. So I'm not really 100% disappointed, although it is a little bit upsetting that there isn't a dedicated autofocus switch. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily considered a con, but the filter ring size on this is 43mm. I own 58mm filters, so basically just going to have to get a step up ring. But just something to keep in mind. I don't know necessarily how many people might have 43mm filters, but if you don't have 43mm, don't go buy more filters. Just buy a step up or a step down ring. So just keep that into consideration. So I'll say right out of the box, for a Canon lens, brand new, even in manual focus, the focusing ring it's still like, I understand it's a new lens, but it really has like this kind of like stiff, feels like it just needs to be broken in, and it hasn't gotten to that point yet. It's really like, I mean, when you're manually focusing with this, like, you have to kind of throw it a little ways before you can actually get there. So just keep that in mind. It's not, I wouldn't say it's a huge downside, but I'll let you guys know when I do like a 6-month review on this if it has gotten any better or any worse. But it's just, to me, it's like a really, you gotta throw it a long ways to focus it manually, so just keep that in mind. So if you guys found this video interesting or useful at all, go ahead and give it a like, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't like it, also give it a thumbs up. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit all the buttons, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.